Hey guys, welcome back to the traditional mixed media fan art draw. I'm Osmosis, an artist based in Australia. I've been doing this for a few years, sharing on Twitch for about 3 years, and I have come across to a better fit, a better place, a place that I really appreciate. A lot of mentors, masters, the amount of content creators out there that put excellent videos, tutorials, how-tos, you name it. It's I finally made the jump, and it's a good fit for us. So we are, I think, 5 streams into a few, 4 of these. This is the 4th one, and probably the final one. But also one fundamental drama in your drawing episode where we looked into Bridgman and how to draw the Marvel way on setting up your characters. So with an anatomical model and gestural drawing. If you haven't seen that there, it's been getting a bit of traction. There's a few hundred people who have looked into it. Which is 10 times more than Twitch, which is great. So the stats are, and the people are responding to the kind of content that I've brought here. And I know that we don't need another craft beer brewery, and we don't need another coffee, cafe. We don't need more tutorials necessarily of the same thing on YouTube. But it's if you think for you, the particular artists and mentors that influence you, it's not every artist out there, it's not every master, it's not every version of Jim Lee and David Finch and Todd McFarlane and Rembrandt and so forth. It's particular people. So the way I look at it is that the value of what makes us individual and what enables us to communicate either through art or through both art and content such as this, means that you might connect with someone that you connect with on a personal level or on an artistic level, or both. And that is why I think it's a good thing for this kind of communication, this kind of content and transparency, particularly at this point. So where I've got a bunch of knowledge, a bunch of experience and competencies in various types of art. So far, mixed media. So I think from least experience through to most, it's paint, oil painting, mixed media, and then it's digital art, illustration, and so forth. 28 years in digital illustration, mixed media, like mixed digital, if you want to call it that, because you've got illustration, graphic design, web design, multimedia, film school, animation, video games development, branding, now merchandise design, and I picked mixed media up for the past, I think it was like 2020, something like that. So we're going to have a look in today. Quick recap on what we've built here. You can see Michelangelo. Let me know if he's your favorite or who your favorite is. We've got another 2 to draw. Donatello's already done, who was the thumbnail for this. If you want to have a look at what he looks like, the Instagram link is in the description, along with every other resource, artist, mentor, and supplies that we've used and spoke about on the past 4 streams, including this one. And you can see Donatello under the Instagram post. If you scroll down a little bit, he's in there. This guy is pretty much on par. It's very similar in terms of rendering quality, same artist, but except that I did that, I think 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, something like that. So you can see that he's been rendered from head to tail so far on, with both the marker and the pencil. You won't see the marker anymore. If it is in there and is coming through the pencil, it is in very small portions because most of the work here is the rendering of a colored pencil. I am using Prismacolor, which is the list of colors that go up and down here. Let me see if I can get rid of that microphone. There we go, just pivot my camera. Hopefully the green screen doesn't pop anything else off. Actually, I might just slide myself back. There you go. I can even just break the fourth wall there. There we go. And look at you. You remember that time when you were a kid and you thought there was a potential that people in the TV could see you or come through it? Hence horror movies and thrillers that had that idea. All right, so we've got the list of Prismacolor pencils. Most of what I'm using up the side here, I've got them on this real cool little, I don't know how I figured it out. Basically, you can trigger a GIF file where I can push a button on my Stream Deck and it brings in the process right at the top and then makes it disappear and brings it in, disappear. And yeah, so I can bring in all my stuff like that. So I've got all my colors here. Those ones are the ones I've enabled for this guy here. You don't need all of these colors, but it just gives you a little bit of, you know, like blending in here and there. And if you want something that's half cool, half warm, you know, you've got your aquamarine or true green or some of those other options in here. And I've got the pencils up here, which are the round ones. Prismacolor pencils are, for me, one of the most central, most universal, most useful for everyone, fit for everyone type pencil, particularly for fan art, particularly for vibrant colors, for blending, a bit of grace in if you make a mistake or if you need to blend it over or change it. You might see Natiri appear up here. I completely screwed up the eye with the lens. You're wearing these lenses for flying on the Banshees, and I was just rendering away and I went right through the lens with the eyebrow, in fact, and I realized that it had to all be like brown or something, and yet I came back and rendered over top of it with brown, over top of blue, and I got away with it somehow. So it is amazing how forgiving the Prismacolor pencils are. They're wax base. I highly recommend them. Link is in the description, so you don't have to remember it for now. You can grab it later. And then I've got a couple of Caran d'Ache Supercolor 2 softs in here, which are the hexagonal ones. Nice size, actually. These pencils. They are there just to supply just a couple more shades than I might have in the Prisma at the moment, because I've pretty much just gone, oh yeah, I've got a whole bunch of greens, I'll get started. But you don't really need all of them. The Supercolor and Caran d'Ache in general, like the Supercolor are wax, the Pablos are oil, and then Luminance and are wax again, and the Aquarel or something like that are water-based something or other. Never mind that for now. But they're a little bit harder, a little drier, but they have excellent color. This is a student brand, a student budget range, so they're a bit more. I think they're more expensive than the Prismacolor, but they are the lower budget ones for Caran d'Ache, being like one of the premium type colored pencils in the world, particularly the Luminance, which is kind of like your professional model. But what you can do with any of these pencils comes down to you, which is what the last 3 sessions have been doing this. So if you like this and you want to do this, you can go back over the past 3. You can speed it up, you can mute me, put your favorite music on, and watch me do it quickly, with a couple of references to my actual reference, or maybe a couple of detours for associated things that were regarding our commentary or communication, or if we needed to reference or somebody asked a question about something that they were doing they needed help with, I might have just gone off on a tangent for 5 minutes. But by all means, speed me up if you need to get through the past 3 videos. Have some drawing company. If you follow my process along, which I'll go over with you in a second as I'm drawing, it'll teach you how I do it, and then you can copy that and then branch off into your own method that will suit you. At least this can definitely, if you like this, if you like this, copy the process, you'll get the same results. Well, I think it's pretty accessible. I don't see any complexity in it, and I went from, I think, in a couple of weeks of starting this, way back, like, I don't know, it was like 14 years ago, 10, 13, I don't know, years ago, over a decade ago. And I haven't been doing it for a decade. I'd only been doing this type of thing, maybe if I condense all of it down, probably only like a few months worth of effort. But I think it only took me a couple of weeks to really get into the groove of doing portraiture. But every time you do one, you get better, and sometimes you can't name it why you are, but the persistence will get you there. So quick recap on what we did first. So let me bring up my reference material. So this is for anyone who wants to do fan art. Get yourself a reference image, preferably a photo, or you take a photo of something such as someone in a cosplay outfit that you really like, or they want you to draw them, take a photo of them with their gear on. That's what Alex Ross does with his own camera and his lighting. You can even set your own lighting up. I did that with Donatello, if you see him appear up here. I have the NECA figurine, which is not the big 18-inch one, just the 7-inch one. I set him up with his bow staff, and I put some lights on in the studio and took a photo of him, and then I just brought him into Procreate, and all you need to do for this is just trace over top of your guy, like that. And the amount of detail you put into it is up to you, but you'll find out when there's too much information and you can't see the detail, and then there's too little and you lose your way and you don't know how to line up by eye with the photograph of what you're doing. So basically you can actually work with another artist, so you can work with a penciler or an inker if you ask them to draw lightly, or do a light finish or photocopy at 50% opacity. But as a colorist, as a traditional medium, mixed media artist who comes in, takes the original sketch and puts the color to it, this is where you come in at this stage, when the pencil has been drawn, or the ink has been drawn, or been digitally drawn and placed onto paper, photocopied onto paper. So what I've done is just drawn over top of a photograph of a real figurine, a real character, from the 1990 movie that I really liked. Donatello's done the same way. I drew over top of him, got the line art, and then printed him onto this paper here, which is the Strathmore. None of this is sponsored, by the way. This is a Strathmore toned grey. They also have a toned sepia, and it is thin. It's only 118 GSM, which is I don't know, it might be twice the thickness of cheap print paper, so it's not bad, but it's not super thick for mixed media in general. It's just a really nice tone to draw on. You'll notice if you draw on white, it can be, I don't know, it seems to wash out with the light, but when you draw color on top of this toned paper, it bounces. It's a really nice finish. But your other option is, which we'll do another time, is to take something like this, which is your, like, it's a professional quality paper, this one here, so it's more expensive. That's 300 GSM, so it's over twice as thick. There's only a few pages in this one. It's saying 12, and that one is it says watercolor pad, and it is hot pressed. So this is what was recommended on David Finch's channel when they did some mixed media that involved some acrylic base or some watercolor paint, or if you're using a lot of alcohol markers as well. So that's in the description as well, so you don't have to remember it. You can check that out later. That's there for you. So once you can print, make sure if you're printing this out onto your paper, always change the paper settings on your printer and in your PDF document. If you're printing on the PDF to that document, to a PDF document into the printer. Make sure the PDF has the settings at actual size. I recommend 300 DPI minimum, so you won't have pixelated drawing, but it's not the end of the world. Alright, so let's hide that. There's a few other projects in there which we'll talk about another time, because we all did them at some point as well. So, but I spoke most of the, I've done quite a few projects, I don't know, 100 of streams on Twitch. Some of the content is still there if you wanted to catch some other stuff, but yeah, all the finished art's on the Instagram. So I'm just looking at the photo off to my right here just to check the lighting. I've printed you can see here on the very edge, it's very kind of thinned out, there is a 50% opacity black line art that was printed onto this paper. And then I used Copic markers here. So I just used these from Japan. They're available most around the world at art suppliers or online at stores. So you want to check that out. You don't need this brand, but I would recommend, if you can, just try out a couple and see if you're happy. It all comes down to how thick, how accurate you think the color is, and how watery it might appear. And it really comes up to you, because there might be a brand out there that seems to fail miserably against this, but it has a really cool effect. Then what you do is you consider that brand useful for that effect. Don't necessarily have to say it's terrible, it's just different. I like Copic because they're available to me, that I can get them from the office store. They're reliable, they're one of the best. They evaporate quite not too quickly, but at a rate that this whole paper here, this quite thin mixed paper, it's not really suitable for mixed media, it's mostly just pencil or charcoal. But it actually dried up quick enough so it didn't warp the page. So Copic's for that. This combination, if you like toned paper. If you want to spend more time putting a very heavy watercolor, alcohol marker or watercolor backdrop onto a thicker paper, then use the Arches, which is the brand that's in the link. A thicker paper for mixed media, and you can put a wash over the background. You could even airbrush it onto the background if you wanted it to be a bit more, or spray can if you want to have this sort of tone in the background. And then I think what you do is you might be able to draw on top of that, or you can spray a matte fixative, which is not really part of today. That's something you put over top of your artwork to stop it from being affected by the elements. They didn't have that hundreds of years ago. I don't believe they had varnish as much either, but I could be wrong. So I put my Copic markers down, and all I did is, if I just quickly show you again my reference here, all I did was look at his anatomy and the lighting, and I just followed it very loosely, but where these lines are in the thighs and that, I just supported them so I know where they are. It becomes like a landmark for where it is. If you just fill the whole leg in light green, and you're confident of following the reference image along with your eye, go for it. But if you really like the likeness of characters in your art, and you basically just want to get your rendering skills into that process, enjoy the process, and get the exact same character that you see in the movie, then putting these notes down, as I call them, this is notation. This is basically an underdrawing that lets me know where stuff is, as the same as if you were to take notes from a masterclass and to remind you what things you need to study to follow up on. And so I just used about three different shades of green, and I think this is even a dark blue in here, which we'll talk about color theory as I'm going in a moment. All right, let's get rid of the reference image and we'll get into it. All right, so we're going to go for, I'm using green apple, and I am just going to sharpen this with a block sharpener, one of these guys, one of these cheap ones. I just find them reliable, and I don't know, you pick it up, it's steel, everything's fit together. I guess it could be sharper than, or as sharp as a samurai sword. If I went, I've never sharpened it, and it just keeps on doing it, and it doesn't break my pencils. I had a Prismacolor Premier one, and it has one of those in it, the same shape, same blade, but for some reason it just keeps breaking the pigment out of it all the time. And then the other thing you'll use is a synthetic brush. Sorry about the treble then. A synthetic brush to brush away the crumbs. Don't use your hand unless you want dirty streaks across, or color pencil streaks all the time across your page. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because I've had it happen a couple of times and gone, oh, that's kind of a cool, dirty, original look, you know, and just left it like that. But if you want to control your composition and the quality of the detail, use a synthetic brush and just lightly brush away your penciling. The first thing we're going to talk about is what's very central to my method, the Osmosis method, is when I got, very early on when I got into this, I didn't actually put a word to it. I just realized that there was more to a subject, or more to a fan art opportunity than just shading in. It was textured. Characters were textured. They had clothing, they had skin texture, they had hair, facial hair, different materials, leather, steel, and then also different lighting. And I realized that if I wanted to replicate that detail, that realism, illustrated realism in my work, I needed to adjust the way that I applied these pencils. So I looked at the type of shapes that were in my characters of my muse, and in the face and in all the features, and I broke them down into a single application, a single technique, a stroke, and a repeat, some sort of algorithm that was very easy, like a visual, a visio-analytical little process that went on in my head and gone, well, the thing that looks a lot like Ninja Turtle skin is these little circles, but that are kind of overlapping. So I guess if a circle gets overlapped by another circle by a bit, then what I've kind of put down for each stroke really is a little letter C. And I just do C, 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 C. So all these bumps and textures that you see in Michelangelo, I've drawn every single one of them. And it doesn't take that long, I don't think. But I think it slows you down a little bit. You do a high quality effect, and then after 10 minutes or so, you've got yourself an entire limb, or a leg, or a sword, or something, and it's been rendered in the same sort of texture or pattern in the direction of the lighting, all at the same time, and it's all filled out, and it looks great. So you have to do these in passes. So I'm doing a base color. So for Mikey, I've got a green apple color that suits his complexion. The 4 turtles have a slightly different complexion, each one of them. And Mikey is like this light, warm, which suits his personality as well. So I'm just using the letter C. Now, what I call this, those of you who have already seen the first 3 videos and have hung out with me for the past few years, this is old news to you, but I'm just sharing it over again because for everyone who comes in. The other thing too is that I could say something once or twice here and there, and it might be understood or agreeable, but then it kind of gets forgotten because if it's not repeated, it might not seem important. But the buzzword is stance, which I derived from martial arts or samurai poses in close quarter combat and sword fighting and that's basically the position that you take for a particular attack, for in this case for a particular technique, and that just gets you in the mindset of what it takes to achieve the laborious process of building something out in a way that creates the look of realism or texture. Like it's a tangible thing. For me, that's just something that the way I analyze reality, the world, I have a certain microscopic things that stand out to me, and I want to emulate that and understand it and redo it and sort of grab a hold of it and portray things somewhat literally or accurately. I mean, I don't think the reason why a lot of us are attracted to realism is a wonder. There are certain wonderful things about reality, and to control that or to replicate it or to increase the amount of something that you like with realism is easy to understand why that is a motivation. I think we probably won't talk purely about the psychology of, art psychology and that. That'll just naturally mix into what we do with each type of medium. We'll let the art sort of determine what things we might consider that are connected between art and us as people, and why we might think that way, and what makes us artists, and so forth, as it comes. But for me, doing illustrated realism as a colorist, if I've got my colorist hat on, as I do right now, that is the thing that I'm interested in, then this is the process to do that. At the moment, because most of Mikey's leg is in the light according to my photographic reference, I am just going to go over his entire leg here using my stance. So on this side of the leg, where the light comes down this way, the cool light is on the right and the warm light is on the left. So when the light comes across this way, let's say when the light comes in a particular direction, I'll use this little bump here. So this is, if we zoom up, I don't know, 1,000 times or something, or 250 or 500 times, here's the little texture of a Ninja Turtle's skin. One little bump that you see, these little dots. Each one of them are one of these little Ninja Turtle bumps. You can see how the shadow is on the right, so that if the warm light is coming from this way, it casts a shadow on this side. That shadow there is what I'm drawing over and over again with my stance. So I'm drawing the letter C, which represents this shadow. And then what it leaves underneath is this bright spot, or in this case, it will be the base color that's underneath, which is your marker pencil, or your marker pen, or watercolor, or if you want to put like a very thin wash of watercolor underneath, you can do that too, and then let it dry, flatten, keep it flat and dry, and then and then come back and bring your pencil into it for the detail effect. So now what I'm doing is I'm drawing, so with the light coming this direction, which I don't have an example of one of these kneadable erasers doing that, the shadow's on the other side, so I'm drawing the letter C to create that little valley, and it's a subtle little light divot in the paper. That means that if I do a large C here, there's a line that's stuck in, pushes into the paper, and then the page comes through, and it's a little bit higher. When we introduce a lighter color later on, it applies itself to that bump. If you do that on a micro level, you end up with something that emulates a real sort of skim texture at this ratio, at this scale. And that's a little bit the road less traveled. I think there's a lot of realists out there, a lot of realist art out there. And you can spend an infinite amount of time on detailing a drawn piece. It's like, how long do you want things to take? I would have to say that my approach is somewhat balanced regarding realism. So it looks illustrated, it looks real, half real, half illustrated, and I'm okay with that, because at the end of the day it's kind of meant to be a little fun, a little fictitious, right? You might not see a lot of texture in it now because the base color just sort of washes together, but it'll build up. I mean, you can see this here. So if you like what you're seeing here, we'll get that into this. So now what we have is a whole bunch of texture in the leg that actually works as a compounding texture when we continue inwards, with additional shadowing and additional highlights, and it compounds on top of what's there, and that's probably the better way to say it. Okay, so I'm going to jump ahead to a darker color. I've got a grass green here. That's not on my list because I don't have it, but you've got a Prussian green there, or forest green, whatever. I mean, you're not drawing, you might not be drawing this guy, but I am. So you can use whatever color you want, but I just recommend jumping ahead a couple of shades. This line here is, this shadow here is a little sharp. So I'm just going to reinforce that a little bit, and then it kind of fades off a little bit here where the shell or something comes further off the leg and the light sort of diffuses a little bit more. So we're just going to simulate that. I'm just checking my photo reference as well. I just want to also, the light comes this way, so I'm going to go back to doing my C stance. So just doing the letter C over and over again, overlapping a little bit, and I'm pushing on the page as light or as heavy as the shadow is. It depends on the shadow, the base under drawing there. If the shadow is heavier and thicker or darker, I go a little bit heavier or a little bit denser in the drawing. If the shadow tapers off into the base color, then I lighten off and I go looser and looser and less completist on each of those textures. Just with your photo reference, I recommend, just to reinforce what reference you're working from, where you're getting your sketch from, I recommend, this is my method, and if you like the result, then I would highly recommend, in order to get this, use a photograph of a real person, a cosplay, an actor, a film, what do you call it, a still photography, the production photos, production stills, photographs of figurines, likeness figurines, stylized ones, but get something real, draw over something real, or get a reference with real texture and real lighting into it somehow. Because you want to get firsthand how the whole aspect of lighting works and how it reveals the details and the textures and the the speculative effect, the diffusion, the surface, the refraction, the light passing through certain stuff, certain materials. You've got refraction, reflection, specularity, diffusion. You got your finish, the different materials that they are, like leather or shiny frog skin or something like that. So, yep, okay. All those little nuances that look so juicy and so tangible and so interesting to look at, like Lego scenes where they do the whole scenery up to make it look like it's a real place, or G.I. Joe catalogs back in the 80s and 90s. The reason why some of those things look so juicy is because they realize the visual ASMR, the visual delight of these little worlds, these little micro worlds, and how to repeat them. Like they'd go and make a bunch of gelatin or jelly for a little ocean or a little sea or a river scene where they put the G.I. Joe in the river that's splashing around. It's all made out of gelatin or jelly or something like that. Jello is, I think, Americans call it. So you're getting that from real substances and from real resources and imagery and lighting. That is so valuable. Even if you're doing stylized art, even if you're doing cel-shaded manga type comic style, like if you could take it to a stylized and simplified or smoothed, streamlined sort of look. But if your art is still following real lighting principles, you're going to get some convincing and either obvious or mysterious, or obvious or mysteriously tangible and artwork. Like it's people underestimate or undervalue the usefulness of looking at nature, at reality, at real lighting. Hey, if you're into Yu-Gi-Oh characters or something like that, or Dragon Ball, OG Dragon Ball characters and that, I still recommend go and get, if you're already drawn your Dragon Ball character, then go and get a shot from I know you might not don't like the live Dragon Ball movie. Go and get a shot from Mortal Kombat movie or something, or the video game. Some of the realism, next-gen realism rendering and that in some video games is pretty good as well. Have a look at characters that are lit and then bring that lighting and those rendering qualities across. You go, okay, Scorpio has a different arm to Goku, however it's he got the sleeves off or something like that, so you can see the arms. And he's holding his arm like this, and it's lit blue here, but then it's like got all this glowing ambience going on up here and some bounce lighting under the hand, and then he's got a warm light on this side. And then because of that reference, you're able to make your stylized, streamlined type manga in that style utilize the source of, like, okay, I can see how the light is shooting through the fingers and sort of make him look transparent. but it's also shooting between the fingers like rays of light, like sunshine coming through the clouds. And then there's this glow on them, and you're able to simplify that. But if sometimes, I don't know, you can tell the difference. Give it a go anyway. But in my experience, mucking around with light from reality has been one of the most rewarding aspects of hand-drawn traditional fan art, and I can't recommend it enough. So I'll just keep on saying the same thing. Like here's another fan art that I did. It's a Marvel. It's my own take on. I won't go into the backstory, but he does have a backstory. Let's just bring up the Instagram of Cyclops. There we go. This is my own version of Cyclops with some lighting in it, some street lighting. All right, so he's staring at us. But if you have a look at the lighting down here, magentas, yellows, some oranges, and then mixed in with the black leather jacket. So some warm neon, fake sort of. And then over on this side, more street light or moonlight type night light. Clear, crisp, a bit sharper, more reflective, less diffused, just crisp, more crisp. And so when you zoom out, you can see that. And so they're treated differently. So the warmer light sort of disperses laterally across the scene, whereas although I would say that the clean light on this one takes up most of the fill on that case there. And then things like the street lights in the distance there, I've just faded them out using just blending, just straightforward blending, because it's not supposed to be textural at all, and even some markers. And so there's some street lights in the background there, and then gives the scene some depth. And then if you have a look at his goggles there, he's got some sharp reflections, white reflections in there, and of course the refraction of the light coming through of his eyes, coming through the lens and then through rain that's falling and diffusing and refracting and bouncing that and shooting that light off in a kind of strange way as well. And that was referencing real lighting, and it gives you a chance to really start to ad-lib and get creative. It's actually quite simple. Like once you understand 3-point lighting, for example, you've got a fill light, you've got a rim light, and then a backlight. You don't have to use 3-point every time. This one is mostly just 2-point, so warm fill on this side, and then more of a rim light, a cool rim light on this side. It's just that it's more like 2/3, 1/3, just to sort of get that. And you can really mix it up. It really depends. Like if you look at a lot of movie covers with portraits or portrait photography on them as well, you'll see a variety of lighting as well. I think Face Off with Nicolas Cage and John Travolta on the front cover, they have a shadow going down the middle of the face so that they can join the faces up without you seeing a scene, but they just put it into the shadow and then they light 2-point light from that. I don't know if it's top lit or backlit as well to create a little bit of a rim on that side, can't remember, but there's a lot of good examples out there. I'm a bit of a fan of, a heck of a fan of cinema, but a bit of a fan of like 80s noir action, like Detective 80 and all that kind of stuff, action, like 48 Hours, Lethal Weapon, Beverly Hills Cop. A lot of those were a bit comical as well. I like the sort of the serious tones of them. I think some of them were meant to be thwarting like a little bit humorous because they were in so much danger and they had such a great attitude towards, you know, I'm getting too old for this, but then you're making those statements while in deep trouble, so you don't even have time to, in reality you don't have time to make statements that the cinema would love to hear. Yeah. So, but I do like a bit of that. I do like Blade Runner and Altered Carbon and that dark noir Matrix. Alright, so I've just taken the darker color here and defined a lot of it where the shadows are. So I've got the light, the exposure, but then I've got in and created that definition, which I put in earlier with the underdrawing with the Copic marker. And I'm just taking my time to get the form, the volume right. So I'm just looking at my photo reference and I'm trusting it to inform me about the accuracy and the truth of the lighting on how to get this guy looking right. So much about cinema, so much about art, it's exposure. It's exposure of the idea, it's exposure of your talent, it's exposure of your commitment. But the light, if you take away the light, you don't see anything. As an artist who is building something traditionally with hands, you're not shining a light on it. You're having to work with the aftermath of what happens if you shine a light on something. You're having to draw what's exposed, and that's why a real photograph reference is, until you sort of really grab a hold of it yourself, it's a really good thing to have, because you're not just rendering the shape of a leg. I'm not just doing a green leg and then shadow and then highlight. There is a lot more in his anatomy, but there's also a lot more in how the light reacts with the different levels of that anatomy as well. And a photograph will tell you the truth about that. And that's the thing that's enjoyable to look at, is that people know you've taken a pencil or some traditional media and you've built, oh yeah, that guy that they know, that they like, they can identify it, they see it straight away. And the thing that's so sort of immersive and visually appealing about it is the truth about it. It's resonating truth, tangibility, volume, texture. It's communicating things to them like, I know that's in my third dimension, that's in my dimension, but it's art, yet it's in my dimension. Alright, so up here, where it starts to get a bit darker, where the shadows are, I have used one of my favorite colors, which is Dahlia Purple in the Prismacolor range, or a similar color in another brand. And this is where we bring color theory in. So pink or purples are opposite colors on the spectrum to green. They're known as complementary colors. So do opposites go together in color theory? Yes, it does. There are tasteful ways to do it. In fact, it's really hard to screw up putting two opposite colors together. Like, I don't know if it's possible, because in any way that you sort of do it without like mixing it around in a pool of cookie dough or cake mix or something like that, and just creating brown, when you've put that purple shadow on top of green, it really works quite well. And then if you put a darker green monochromatic shadow or a warm yellow light with green, then that goes as well, because that is the next phase along on the hue spectrum is yellow. So you know, yellow, green, blue, purple, pink, red back to orange, back to yellow, and it repeats. When I'm down in this case here, because I've got light color on this side, cool light on this side and warm light on this side, I want to make the shadows darker again on this side. So how I'm going to make it darker from the warm point is going from yellow through to orange through to brown. So green, yellow, brown on that side of the spectrum, because it's a warm part of the spectrum. When I want to get darker on this side, on the cooler side, I go on the other way from the green. I go towards blue and then purple, and then eventually magenta if I want to take it even further. But it doesn't, you only really need to go no more than 2. So I've gone through yellow to brown, which brown is just a desaturated or a dark orange, really. And I'm going to put that dark brown into the darkest parts of the green on the warm side. And what I'm going to get is it hue shifting a little bit, getting darker, and just adding a next phase of rendering that fits the rest of this sort of colorful, vibrant, saturated, tasteful, fun type mixed media, hands-on traditional fan art. If I get a little too heavy here and there, or it gets a little too brown or dry, or it looks out of place once I've rendered it, what I can do is just use a bit of green, a little base color green, and that will, or the darker green or base color green, and that will tone it down. After this, I would use a little bit of black, but we don't use too much black in general, unless you're doing something quite extreme. You don't use black or white too much. You use everything you can up until that point. I'm still using my stance too, my stance method. So every time I'm drawing a shape in here, I'm drawing this shadow around the skin on this side, and then on the skin on this side, I'm drawing the shadow around this side. So I'm doing the letter 3, it's a reverse C actually, so it's the stance is reverse C, or the number 3, or a half 3. And that is what that's what my stance, that's my state of mind. My stance is the number 3. Like, is it Sesame Street ads, commercials? They do a commercial for the number 3. And I'm just got to bear in mind and also check my reference about where exactly the warm tones hit. So they appear to be hitting on the left side of these thigh muscles. This one's an interesting down here. This one actually has a shadow up and some rendering, cool rendering on this side of it from the light that hits the top of the high point. Then it goes into a shadow on this side that is warm, but in down the middle is a subtle valley of light. So if you have a look up here on the neck here, it does the same thing, and here as well. See that little slither of light? How it's just very tasteful dip in the neck there. So you've got you have the that neck muscle. You have that neck muscle come down, and then creates a shadow from this side, but then the light still hits a certain part of it before it dips up and comes back up around that apple and creates a shadow, because that apple is so vertical and so embossed in this direction towards us, light can't bounce off the side to it. So it touches a bit where it ramps up at the bottom of the hill, and where that apple comes up in the neck, the sides can't reflect light to our eyes, so we see another shadow again, and then it curves slightly around again and starts reflecting light to us again. So that's what happens, and I got that because I referenced a real photograph once again. And that's another example of nature giving me a sample of how great artistic opportunities exist in reality. So a lot of art styles or stylizations, that is a streamlining, it's a simplification, it's bringing fun. But a lot of modern art was done simple to pump it out, or for animation where it had to be simpler in order to do frame after frame. So they simplified it. But I tell you, like, there's been some modern day examples where they can do mocap of. They can capture the motion of an actor doing stunts and that, and then apply it to a 3D model, which is nothing new, and then render the model in a 2D finish. So you actually get a character that looks completely 2D, but the lighting is truly, and they don't have to render every single aspect of the character as in hand render, or simplify it because they can't draw that much shading and rendering for every single angle, except for now they can with VFX. Excuse me. Dry throat. Alright, so I'm gonna I guess what it sort of comes down to is how well you do at capturing the reality of light in your fan art, and how it sort of brings it to life. To me, that's a the more I think about it, I think that is very much at the core of my motivation, is actually just bringing stuff to life. It's a cause of animation, to animate, to give life, to bring to life. And part of that is the way that I do what I do, and ultimately appreciation and a passion for it. Alright, so we've got a bit there. I'm going to gun for some more compositional support, which means building it out more. Before I put too much into one aspect, I build out more of the scene to help me get a better idea. I'm going to bring in some... I think this tip is about to break off. I'm just going to take it off because... I'm going to take it off before I break it off. Because it's wobbling around and I don't want to wreck my piece. I used it for a bit. This is yellow ochre. I'm going to get it a little sharper to see if I can carve it into the high points of the leg on the left side, the warmlet side, just to add that hue shift. So making sure that this side of the leg is true to the light source. So I am doing, because this is a highlight and not a shadow, I'm not drawing the shadow, I'm drawing the highlight. So I'm going to actually do the letter C on this side instead, with this one, instead of a 3. Because if you're drawing the highlight, you have to check what stance you're doing compared to if you're drawing a shadow. So they're reverse. So C and reverse C are very straightforward. It's not a complicated sort of approach. And that's how my stance works out for this one. So once again, I'm building another layer into this composition. Just a little dab there. there is more texture, more content, more media on the page. I'm still doing little C's down on this side as well. They're all highlights. So the texture that's already there, what I'm putting down, it's all contributing more and more and more. And the marker that was underneath is slowly disappearing. Under this yellow and everything else I put in so far. Blend some of that brown in with this yellow. Should be able to see, yeah, you can see a difference. You can already see a difference on the camera there as well, which is, if you can step back and have a look at what you're doing, or if you have a streaming setup, obviously you'll know what I'm talking about, where you can see what I'm doing. What you're doing on the camera on a screen that's a finer resolution that appears further away. It's also a good way to monitor your progress and how it's doing. The streaming setup is really good, really handy for me referencing my rendering. So got a lot of texture in there. It's a little, or it's very impressionistic in a way, where you can see a lot of the strokes that are in the page. It's not so smoothly rendered like a 90s airbrushed, digitally airbrushed sort of scene. Everything has a gritty, real sort of texture to it. And you can actually smooth that out with the brush, a paintbrush, like just giving it a brush or dabbing it like that, and that will reduce the fidelity and the accuracy of it a little bit, but it also just mattes it out a little bit. And there is a bit of a fair bit of a repeat with this. So if you think about it, if you're doing something like this, it's about, I don't know, this is the 4th session and they're 3.5 hours each. So 4 times 3 is 12 and 4 halves are 2, so 14 hours. 14 to 20 hours. But if you do 3 hours a day of drawing, you can do this in a week. And which means that if you're just practicing your first year, which is a year of studying is a year of studying. It's like, it's not a lot, it's not a little, it's a great start. It's required, you know, your dreams, you know, your passions, invest into it. You're worth it. So you spend that time working on your art for a year. That's 50 pieces of art a year. You have an awesome gallery by that stage. Let's not talk about monetizing or running a business or content development or anything else like that. We're talking about you developing as an artist and finding fulfillment as a person. Doing that is an epic start. This is a temporary studio at the moment, guys. I'm renovating a whole studio setup downstairs. That's a long-term sort of project. It's sort of halfway through, I guess. Just washing out those textures a bit. It'll keep its textures, but I'm just sort of taking a little back again, so I can sort of control it and bring back some more tone in. And some more texture in a second. I'm going to put some blue in on the other side, on the cool side, because we need to balance this out with what's happening in the scene. Blue is going to be the number 3 because the highlight is on this side of each of the skin pores, so I have to draw the reverse C, or if I'm just doing a couple at the same time, I'm just doing the number 3. and I'll draw them up or downwards. Either way, it can be laborious. So, and I'm rotating the pencil as well to get the sharp side of the pen every couple of seconds or so. I rotate the pencil because as you're drawing on side after side, you want to rotate the pencil so you can get the sharpest side and the most. And the reason why this stance is such a good sort of thing to remember is because when you get a little bit tired, you start to get a little bit loose, and then you start shading in, just regular old school shading, and that can, because you get tired, whereas the stance is like, no, you need to be drawing, you need to be doing this stroke, this letter, this shape, or use this mentality, like I'm drawing wool or the figure 8 or the figure S over and over and over again, all next to one another. I'm just using that and I'm sticking with it, and that will get me result. It's when you're doing something on repeat that much, it's really good to have a little thing that you have to remember to get it over and to get it under control, is what I'm trying to say. At this stage, there's that much texture on my page now, I can actually be a little bit loose. So long as I'm not stroking like this, I'm not going to ruin the general texture that's in there. I'm going to cut in on that yellow a little bit, sort of round it off. Like that cool light to warm light on that leg there. I'm going to get this slate blue, I think it is. Blue slate. I'll sharpen that up a little bit. I'm just going to get some even higher points in the cool light there. Just check my reference. There's some really sharp sort of highlights, so I might actually get the white in as well. I'm just going to break it off a little bit down there. And then up along here. White will actually have a bit of a hard time. Depending on how much you've got down, it can have a bit of a hard time committing to the page when there's already a lot of wax in there. Just gonna put a little bit down here. It'll build up. It'll build up gradually, but you got to be careful that it doesn't sneak up on you. Right. And I can assimilate that a little bit more if I grab a sort of dull. I've got a electric blue here that's not sharp. And I can use that to blend into the darker greens here and there if I want to. Or even the browns. I'm just dragging some of the textured sort of wax that's already on the page there. Most of the time people are going to look up here and have a glance around at other things, but it's mostly going to go towards the most sort of human aspect of it. Got my white here, it's already sharp, and I am gonna go easy, and it's actually pretty effective right now, so I'm going to avoid stroking, and I'm going to go with like a little stippling sort of effect. And not go too hard either. And I'm having just like tiny little circles because the texture of his skin is small, and it helps support the detail that's there. And the little C's that I've done that have left a little dot, like I'll draw a C here and a little base color dot in the middle. I'm just doing like a boop, and then just a little light on top of each of those, points, approximately, very loosely, not measured, not meta level, just very kind of loosely, just to grab some highlights there. It's just that you wouldn't do the C stance on this with the white at this scale, because the high point of each of those skin tones is smaller than an entire highlighted side of it. But then, work with what you think the light is telling you to do, your reference. In this case here, I am using just a stippling technique to balance that out. And when you get further away from view, the further you get back, like the skin texture on this side is larger than the skin texture on this side, because it's further away, so I have to reduce the size of my technique. And then, yeah, so I'm just working around the other areas based off the speed. How are we going today? I'm an hour 15 so far, and I've only done the thigh, so it looks like we'll have time to sort of work through this and that, the lower leg, and then the leather as well, so you'll get experience with that. The lower leg, like he doesn't have shoes on. Or we'll do the other thigh, we'll work our way down. So we'll do the other thigh perhaps, and then the leather, and that's what gives us a bit of a mix for this session, which means we'll have one last session to go. So then, yeah, we're looking at a drawing that's done in 14 hours plus another 3, so 17 and a half or so. So it's a few hours quicker than, like, usually this is about 20 hours. So the fact that I'm a few hours quicker, going to be a few hours quicker, is an improvement. But the other thing too is, like, you get little nerve-wracking things like, well, did I take 20 hours on Donatello because he's actually better detail? And you look at some of the techniques you've done in somewhere, because different slightly different lighting or lighting reference or character detail in what they're wearing that's a little bit different. It's provided a subtle difference in your rendering opportunity. So it's not, so there's things in, like, if you do all the turtles, there's things across them that are going to be better on different turtles, and it's hard to try to, like, resolve that consistency. You can get it consistent though. It is possible. It just takes longer to work it out. That's looking pretty good. It's looking pretty consistent, speaking of which, with what there is on the top half of him. I can just use that bit of stippling. Yeah, stipple scrub sort of thing. Alright, so it might be a little bit too hard. I'm going to come in with the chartreuse, or however you pronounce it, and just sort of take that down a little bit. He's got a vein that's there that is quite pronounced actually in the reference material. So let's just go with that for now. And this, now that I've got some more compositional support for what I'm, this whole upper thigh now in the quads, now I know how much darker I need to make it where it's dark, where the shadows are. So let's just have a look. See, I'm losing a bit of the quad, that inner side of the quad there. So I'm just going to etch in that, and the last. So this is just the dark brown again. I think up here is dark enough. I can help it out just down here where it's coming into this area here just a little bit, just doing like a little figure 8 stance in there, because that allows me to pick up on different textures that are already in place. And sort of drift across some of the top of it and dig in other places. It just depends on. Now that you got so much texture down, like it's all, and just about any sort of stance will give you that technique and that texture and the results. So okay. That's pretty good. Okay, let's just grab the black. It's pretty sharp, and we're going to use this very little, because there's no, like, this is my method once again. Like, this is, and when I say it's my method, I don't mean that I'm the only person in the world that uses it. I'm just saying that this is what I use in my method if you are using my method, or parts of it. A little bit of black, just because black strips color out of your work very quickly. It becomes neutral. It's not warm, it's not cold, or it might be influenced by approximation, like how close it might be, but it generally, if you look up here, I've used black in this area up here because it's really out of the light. There is very little influence from this space up here. I'm just going to do some circle stance work up there, because that might sort of give it the illusion that the leg is in that space if you're looking at the shell on an angle, like the art on an angle where you can see the lighting reflecting it. It looks like the leg is going up into the darkness a little bit. But that's black there and up here, because there is nothing for the light to bounce off of. So no matter what color the light is, and no matter what color the surface is, because this is so recessed away from the light, whatever's there, then you're talking about blackness. You're going back to a scene that has no exposure whatsoever, no transparency. There's no connection between your eye and the detail that's in that space. Now, on this composition, you'd assume it's just like the side of the shell in here. If we rotated the light around and the camera a bit, it'd have a bit of the shell like the side here, and then the leg would sort of slot into that a bit kind of strangely. Hey, but that's giant Newton turtles for you. That's what that would do. But from this point of view, there's no colored light, or any colored light wouldn't matter because it's not bouncing off of something that we can see. That means it's black. It's out. Can you stylize the shadow anyway? Yes, you can. Stylize meaning, can I make this shadow purple? Yes, you can. Why? Because you're an artist with your own sense of taste. And it would still look cool. If you want naturalism and realism, you would not have any color, any type of dark color or black. You would just have pure black in there. If this had colored spotlights behind it shining through, the blacks are an opportunity for light. Black things are, like, for example, if you look at an 8-ball or a black car, there's a lot of opportunity for reflection. It's very easy to see. If you look at a white car, there's so much reflection going on, you can't see it. So your black car provides an opportunity for light to work, the whole scene and everything that's exposed around black to reflect off of it. If you had spotlights coming through, the black background behind that light would make it easier to see the light. Light is very visible at night because it's not darkness. Light in the day is hard to see because everything is lit unless you look up at the sun. So just a bit of shade theory, if you want to call it that. Color theory comes into it. Like I said up here, you put some purple into the shades, into the shadows, to complement the green, and it adds a really nice cool lighting tone over there. Or monochromatically, you just go further into the darker shades of the same color. In this case, a darker green. This one's a little cool, like as in a cool color, a cooler green. And that's your monochromatic versus your complementary palettes. Monochromatic or warm palette, and then cool palette with your complementary color theory in there. If you want to make any color darker but maintain the saturation and the richness and the vibrance of that color, continue to employ darker colors where the complementary, I would recommend complementary in terms of, for example, if I want this green to get darker and darker, I would add more darker greens and then dark purple into it instead of black. If you mix black into a color to make it darker, you will cut the color out of it. So when it gets darker, it gets starker. If you want it to get darker but stay rich in color and vibrance, then stick with a color. And I can recommend either a darker a pencil that is a darker shade than this one, for example. Or so if I wanted to make this leaf green here darker, I would go either this grass green, or I would go with dark brown, or I would go with dark purple. Up to you. Try that out. You can try them out on a piece of scrap paper, or like a color test palette where you just take the page you're going to work on, take a leaf out of the book, and then put that aside, and you test all your blending colors and palettes and color theory on there. To get those results, but be very careful not to just use white to go lighter and black to go darker. Try to use a lighter or a darker color or a darker hue in a different color that will help darken or lighten your object or whatever it is that you're rendering. Otherwise, you can bring black or white in and it will take the color out of it. It will strip this very thin, spaced out kerning type lighting with the white allows the blue and the green that's around it to influence, to hue that white, so it looks like blue highlight and a green highlight, not just a thinned out pale white. So that's why avoiding stroking and scratching and shading in colors, and then using my method to help get you there, will give you something that is a bit more balanced, a bit more dynamic, and keeps the richness of the colors in there as well. I'm just putting in that little valley. So there's this quad muscle there is so vertical and so muscular that there's an angle right before it gets into the cool light again. There's an angle so steep here that we can't see any light reflecting off of it towards our face. But for a second in the valley between these quad muscles, we're actually seeing just a bit of just a little bit of flat space in there. Look for those opportunities. Check your references. Don't just render a leg like a sausage. And so if you want to have a look at a couple of references in mixed media that are going to be really, I think, really helpful for you, check the description either now or later. And there's just a couple examples on there. You've got David Finch, who's done mixed media painting and some. I think mixed media and painting are his two colorized versions of this sort of thing. There's Chris Stevens, who is a multimedia, mixed media, expert. Like, his stuff is wonderful, and he uses quite a broad range of mixed media opportunities in his work. Links to his Instagram, that will open up a whole rabbit hole for you. And also Frank Frazetta, who has done comics, comic strips, comics, ink work, special commissions, and then some of the most innovative color theory work that you'll see out there. It's not suitable for kids, by the way, so Frazetta's stuff, it's adult, but the color theory that is in there is superb, and there are other places to get it. So if you want to stay PG, David Finch and Chris Stevens, links are in there. Cool. Literally anything I put on here is either going to just add a little bit of spice, or it's going to ruin it, and the way to tell is by only making small adjustments at this point. I think he's done. We're going to change things up a bit now. We're going to go to this. We'll just try to create a little bit of space here. We're going to go to the leather, which is going to use a different stance. So I'm going to get my sepia brown and have a drink of water. This is the base tone for the leather I've been using, and the stance I'm thinking of is it's just a word, even the phonetic of the word that can help you. So what I have used before is kind of like a loose. If I hold the pencil a little farther away so that I'm not going to be too literal and too hard with it, hard pressed, I would say linear sort of scratch, like a linear scribble sort of thing. So just adding some aged, a little dry age in there will kind of polish it as well, just with some of the highlights. But I'm just going to sort of scratch in and kind of like ocean waves in a way as well. Not too vertical, not too like peaky sort of thing, but just sort of overlapping and fitting together. More in that sense. And just with my underdrawing in the Copic marker, I'm going to overlap it with the pencil. It'll disappear. The pencil will disappear into that darker brown there, and the this down here is blue. Actually, I think I put a bit of blue marker into it, and it looks like a colored black, which once again is, I avoided black because it would be too dark. So I wanted to gradually build up the darkness, and I just grabbed another dark color and put it in there. That could have been purple or green, or a dark red or something, or like a crimson or whatever, and it would have just continued to add depth to that thing there. So don't reach for the black, just reach for a darker color, darker shade of that color, or a darker color. and you'll get something that looks quite rich. Just a couple of little scratches out the back there, and I can put just a couple of little wavy scratch sort of things along here, and rotating the pencil often enough so that it doesn't get too fat and flat on me. It's looking pretty good already. Base color, that's the great thing about base color, is it gets you in the ballpark quite early. It lays out the land, and it mows the grass, and what other euphemisms can we use? All right, so the balance of that is pretty good at the moment. There's a bit of like, I'll just put a divot in here. Maybe up here I'll put like a looped divot, so it sort of loops into that and sort of comes back. There we go. Bit of texture, bit of naturalism, bit of chop and change in there. So in my previous one, I built that up with let's go a little bit darker. What could we use? I'm thinking either crimson or a darker brown. I have a feeling we went with a darker brown. I'm going to use some crimson because it's not quite as dark as a dark brown, and there's a bit of color in it. And I'm just going to use it in this area here, this dark mid-tone area, before it really sort of starts to bite in the shadow. And it's just adding another layer, and I'm using the same stance. I'm using linear scratch, wriggle, kind of. Just put a bit in there. Put a bit of that crimson lake into, and there's a bit down here as well. A bit of bounce lighting, actually. It's going to get cool on this side as well. This cool lighting's coming in on top here, so you've got to just sort of keep in mind which side is warm, which side is cool. Alright, that's redded it up a fair bit on your view. I might just tone that down just a little bit. Let's just have a look at the image. I've got my saturation on it. Oh yeah, I'm going to turn off the white balancing, 1 second. Just because that white balancing was throwing it out a little bit as well. Alright, cool. It's nighttime here, so I'm having to adjust the light. The lighting and the camera together don't get the optimal, only daytime stream. Alright, let's come back with the dark brown, so that ultimately we want to use a warm, mostly monochromatic sort of end to this. Now this scratchy sort of look isn't gonna survive entirely, because when I bring back my base color, that will smooth it off a little bit and polish it so it looks like aged leather that still has a sort of specularity to it. So I don't want to lose that entirely. All right. So I'm just looking at my options here. I'm going to use a bit of black. I am going to go that far because I feel like the warm side of this can't get too purple. I might put a little bit in. Black is great for just dabbling with a little bit of definition here and there. It's really quite powerful for adding a bit of definition. But you've got to be careful not to go too hard on that, because it will stand out. because of the way out I'm doing it, I don't want it to look like comic art. I don't mind the look. I did if you might see on my rotating gallery, I did a Street Fighter portrait on there. And he has outlines on him in ink. I think I did it in black ink. I'm going to get a bit of Dahlia purple and just etch it a little bit. So Dahlia purple is like half and half. It's like half warm, half cool, depending on what you blend it out of and into and out of. So I'm just scratching around with it. Alright, sorry, I'm just thinking not out aloud. I have a bit of undulation in, so I'm just going to bring in just a little bit of purple up here. Oh yeah, there's a occlusion. There's a bit of an occlusion thing happening as well. So a line of occlusion is where you end up with a shadow cutting between two light sources because of those two sources aren't substantial enough to cover the area that's not facing you, or that they're not strong enough, or they're not reaching. So I'm just going to chuck in a bit of occlusion along the outside here. So it doesn't just go from dark to light. There is a line along some of these areas that it doesn't reach the light source, doesn't reach the eye, or it doesn't reflect off of it successfully enough, and it kind of does the opposite of what you think it should do if you're just rendering something in an imaginary sort of 3D without any reference. And once again, like, this speaks volumes for using real referencing, because it lets you know that there's a little bit more going on than just rendering stuff in 3D, or, you know, to use that figure of speech. A lot of blue on this side as well, and it's going to be a little bit of a mix in there. So I'm still sort of scratching around a little bit just to maintain some of the texture, but I'm gonna start sort of just using a general blending technique, just because we're getting into more of that polished leather sort of look. So I'm just going to use that polishing stance. It is actually quite complex, the different shapes and effects that are in a real thing sometimes, like aged leather, ribbed, bending, billowing, adjusting shape, having highlights and polished sections and dips and irregularities and all that is actually quite complicated, and it is a little bit difficult to follow. in a hand-drawn piece. Good thing about the whole blending aspect with colored pencils is that you can gradually build up adjustments in your work. Just going to do a little bit of orange there, and then I'm going to come back to some Dahlia purple again and sort of blend it in a little bit there. Use air or a brush. I'm going to get some yellow ochre, burn this a bit more. Just using my polishing really, because at this stage that's the look of the material itself. And if it's quite stubborn, you need to push the pencil or just repeat a few times. But you'll also get diminishing returns because there's that much sort of wax on the page that it's starting to get a little bit heavy, and this is when you're going to bring your brush in a bit more and work that. I'm going to use just a hatching stance as well, contour hatching or hatching stance, just to sort of dig, scratch and blend all at the same time. Looking good. Let's jump it back or burn it more with some beige. So I'm slowly building up. Beige doesn't have a lot of color into it, so I'm not going to be huge on it. It is lighter and brighter, but it's also kind of desaturated and colorless. So I have to bear in mind that getting lighter doesn't mean richer. Got some sand here, which is a little richer as a light color than white or beige. So I'm just going to dig around, polish around, just trying to create a slightly radial effect there. Radial meaning circular glow. That's working out. And then at the highest point, just a little bit of white. Sort of go in each of the directions there, and just like, okay, I'm going to leave it there. Stop in that little section and move around. There's some really good opportunities with the bounce lighting, the cool lighting side, to sort of dig in and follow the ribs of the leather. So I'm just going to use my scratch and see. Scratch around and see something. You see what little shadows and shapes appear to you. I don't know if you guys ever played with your Matchbox cars in the sandpit, and then certain like chunks of sand will fall away. Like, okay, there's a cliff. This would be a nice little driveway, like cliff sort of thing around. I'm gonna follow that. So you just kind of find your way around the sandpit, pretty much building shapes into it and creating your little civilization. It's the same approach. There's quite a lot of wax down at the moment, so Alright. Get up around the other side there. The light's accessing. Bit of bounce lighting. You'll find a lot of things out that when you sort of get into this stage of things, you'll find a lot of little results that present themselves that's quite natural. It's like the chemistry between you and what you're developing. And yeah, I'm excited for you guys to give this a go if you haven't done before, because the what you can bring to the method is a unique perspective as well, and that can produce, everyone can produce some really great results. Alright, so I've got some blue slate in, get my white, and I'm going to find an even more high fidelity type take on some of these lines. I'm not going to fill it out exactly the same. I'm going to be very choosy about some of the little avenues that I take with the white, and it's going to be more minimalistic. And it just takes time. It takes repeat, like do stuff you love, draw stuff you love. With fan art, it's great for this. You drawing stuff you like, which really helps the engagement with your work and your skills. So the amount of work that you have to put in and all the rest of it, it's really engaging. Very light there with the white at this stage. There's some of these really thin high points on the leather. They're thick, they're covered in a lot of color and wax already, and now I'm just bringing in some really sharper colors, and then just concentrated sort of scratching, checking my reference, and some concentrated scratching there. There you go. Because it takes a little while for the surface to adjust, and for the pencil to sort of collect and smear and blend off, and then become more of that color that you're trying to put down, and it'll adjust. So it takes a little while for it to grab and to apply. Think about how leather would fold and twist. And polish off and all that kind of thing, and try your best to employ it. I think you'll be surprised. Like, I think the pencils themselves bring a lot to the game. Got some poppy red here, which is like a Chevy orange, and that's real frizzettery as well. It's great for bounce lighting or warm bounce lighting. Is great for blending between yellows and purples. You can come back with your base, like I consider this as a base color because it's quite medium tone, mid-tone. Technically a base color would say that, like, it's, if you're using a bright yellow, then bright yellow is your base color. It's not an actual highlight. That's coming up nice and rich. You could play around this. You could get molten metal out of this. You could do some Warhammer stuff. Like, the sky is not the limit. It's beyond the sky. It's whatever you can imagine. Like, these pencils, this process, this technique will really get you spinning some classics. I probably need to work on my my other side. The asymmetry. So you're always looking at asymmetry, looking at opportunities in asymmetry. Dark, light, a color, a complementary color, the opposite color, the shape, the pose is asymmetric, but then also you're rendering, so you're looking at a warm, fuzzy sort of polished glow on one side, and then on the other side you're looking at a cool, crisp and detailed version, because the light hits differently. It offers a bit more fidelity for detail that's on there as well. So look for that asymmetry. Just do the opposite on the other side. You know, this is warm and fuzzy on the left, sharp and cool on the right. You can always tone it back a bit, like what I'm doing now. I'm just going to keep that blue local, get some Dahlia purple and outline here, because if in doubt, go back to your reference. My reference is telling me it is shadowing on the far side. Let's try a few things out. Just see, if you put if you scratch some purple in right next to the blue, what does that look like? You know, like, just see what happens when you do a little bit of extremity in there. You can always bring your highlights back in once you've dulled things down a little bit. Just where that bounce lighting is underneath, I'm going to come in with my poppy red just here and take that back. And then just sort of treat the ground as a source of warm light a little bit more, like that. And leave the top cool. Have you guys seen that classic desert chrome sort of reflection? How there's light sand, and then there's dark mountain, and then there's blue sky, and then that goes into a dark blue. That is a classic default for this whole sort of approach. So in the middle, you put your occlusion, basically your mountain line. And then underneath that, you put your warm sand desert colors underneath. It's like, I do lots of, I do merchandise for licensed stuff, including Turtles actually, Ninja Turtles. That worked out quite well. I've got some merch here, I'll show you another time, but I do like keychains and like special effect. Like, I just use the blending options in Photoshop to create all these effects, and I've been doing it for decades. It's fantastic. I love making just 2D graphics look like 3D concepts. I can do 3D as well, but it takes a long time to do it, or a lot longer to do it, for when you're pumping out like 100 products a month or something like that, or 50 products a month or something. And generally when you want to create a reflection on something, it's dark and then light just above it. The horizon just shoots over that darkness, and then that light fades back into a mid-tone and then back into a highlight, and then underneath the darkness, that dark horizon goes down to a mid-tone, and then it goes back down to darkness. And you can play around with the repeat, but it basically keeps repeating from dark to light, fade to light, light fades to darkness, darkness fades to light, and it keeps repeating. But at the horizon, actually, ultimately you want, at the top of the sky, you want it to be darker, right? And that comes down to the horizon, which is nice light. And it really depends the shape of the object that you're rendering, about how many times, from a human perspective, from the eye's perspective, you can only see around an object so much from one perspective. So that whole repeat reflection effect is going to stop at some point. But yeah, I've done many times of rendering metallic, matte, gold, chromed, like all sorts of stuff over and over and over again, different materials, soft enamel, hard enamel, metals, chromes, anodized, finished, matte, rubberized, embroidered, all sorts of finishes and textures in merchandise design, apparel, accessories, homewares. And it's the same thing that we're doing here by hand, and there's certain things that you can remember, such as that desert horizon sort of thing, but you can change the colors out. I've got a bit of denim blue here, a bit of denim blue in the sky, in the reflection of the sky there. It's not really sky, it's actually like a blue LED street light or something in this case. But I also need to bear in mind that this needs to balance out across the body. So either I can adjust what's in the body elsewhere, the lighting, or I can adjust it to match what's further up. And I will do that later once the rest of it's done. Okay, there's probably enough on that. I can come back with my white, because that's like the very last sort of thing you did. I know I did it earlier on, and that was just like round one of trying to establish the darkest darks and the brightest brights. And I'm not going to do too much of this just because it's going to create a different effect altogether. It'll over polish it and it'll make it look really metallic. And I just want to get that polished leather look. That's what's happening. Need some poppy red in the back there. Should be sharp enough. Just got a little bit messy. Bring in some base colors just to help it out. Yeah, no, I think that's working. I'm gonna leave it there. I can adjust it a bit. That was fun, just doing that section. How are we going for time? 2 hours, so we've got another hour approximately. I try to keep it around 3. Excuse me. That probably is a little bit shiny, and the way to fix that is to blur the horizon a little bit more, and that will dull it down. Or I could increase the vibrance and the horizon on this side a little bit more. It's fascinating, like over all these years, like I did some motorcycle design and automotive design, car design as well. Car design was literally a budding automotive industrial designer. I wanted to be an automotive designer when I was a teenager, pretty much my whole teen life, and I've actually got a very passionate sort of opinion when it comes to cars. I like Gran Turismo and driving in cars as well, but yeah, just rendering that stuff out in Photoshop and that getting those results was really enjoyable, trying to make just 2D illustration, digital illustration look like the real thing. I actually sent this guy, a builder, he builds classic Porsches out of aluminium, like out of panel beating and his own frames. Like it looks like a Porsche. I think it might have like a Porsche engine in it, but it's his own hand-built Porsche to look like a Porsche, and classic, beautiful cars. And I really liked him so much, that his work so much, that I wanted to work with him on a conceptual level of rebuilding his car digitally, and then in vector and with this kind of techniques, but 2D, and then allowing us to able to change all the colors just by changing the colors of the rendering and the base color shapes and all that. And I did up a car, like a rebuild of one of his cars from scratch digitally, and it looked so photographically real that it was like I sent him a photograph of his car originally. So it looked so much like a photograph of the car that it was like, why are you sending me a photograph, my own photograph of my own car, telling me you want to do concept design work with me, but you've just taken my stuff. Like he didn't respond at all, and it took me a bit to figure out, like, I put a lot of time and effort into that. Like, I'm surprised he didn't say anything. It's kind of strange. And then I realized that there was no difference between photography and what I'd done. So I was like, the utility of it is being able to customize the entire car before it's built, as if it was built. That's why it looks so real. It looks like it's been built. And because what stirred me to do the drawings is because his drawings, he could build, but he couldn't draw. It was amazing. Like, he might have got blueprints done or made by himself at some point, but he literally had drawings done. Like, he looked like he drew more like I did when I was 10 years old or something. And I was like, well, I can help him out. Like, he does an awesome job and I love what he does, and I can do conceptual art and design for this. So let's throw a thing his way for free and see if he bites. Yeah, and he would have just looked at it and gone, why'd you take a photo? Why'd you just take the photo of my car and tell me that, like, you want to Photoshop my photo? He's like, no thanks. And he's like, so that was the result. Didn't end up getting to work with him because my stuff did not make sense because it was too real. But I think there's a way I presented myself as well, and it didn't make sense at the time. And it's not something I really missed out on, and ultimately, because if I ended up becoming an automotive designer, I wouldn't have re-engaged with visual storytelling, at least not at this point. Which is odd, because if that life worked out really well for me, I would have just loved it. So I think the point of the story is that if you persist with something that you're passionate about, you will eventually get a form of that as a developed part of your life and expression. it, like, this doesn't look like anything like car design, but visual storytelling can involve car design. So I can still do it. I can put it in graphic novels and comics and artwork and that. Like, nothing stopped me from do that. It won't go to production necessarily, but then again, if my art becomes valuable and people buy it, it might actually buy me the ability to buy a car that I really like, or to buy the tools to build one, which is something that I can do as well, because I studied and taught engineering and automotive servicing, so I can do that as well in fabrication. So let's go back to the other thigh and re-engage. Just be careful not to put my hand over too much. I probably should have drawn from left to right, but you learn. I've got my base color again. We're back pretty much at the start of the stream, where I'm going to sharpen that pencil up a bit, and then I'm going to draw the shadow side using the base color. So because the light's mostly coming from the left, or wherever I'm drawing on this side, this lighting side, I'm going to draw a reverse C. That's my stance, is reverse C to get this shadow, or just threes next to one another. And you won't see much of it against that pale green base color put down by the alcohol marker to begin with. But what it does do is it colors the whole area in wax pencil, which is necessary for the rest of the colors to interact with, and for the quality, the textural and the media quality to get built, foundation. So that's going to happen. It's building texture into it, so when I do additional colors as well, it will interact with the textures I've already put down, and it will continue to develop a realistic looking texture that represents the turtle skin, exodermal layer material, thanks to the ingenuity of Jim Henson's puppet and costume development. Provide textural opportunities for us in both contrasts, so shadowing, which will come next, and then and then the highlights and everything in between. I'm going to go over that shadow there just a bit, and I'm just going to put some strokes across that one there, that line, just because when I bring in other shades and tones, I want them all to be affected by the rippling surface, that foundational surface that gets put down. If it helps, sometimes you can do your stance up, because I found like when you're pushing down, sometimes it can be tiring. Just bear in mind, if you're feeling like you're pressing so much, like pushing and dragging down is I don't know, sometimes it creates like a clenching effect in your hand to do that, but then pushing up changes the way that your muscles, so I'm just tilting my hand back as opposed to like squeezing my hand to rotate it down, so you can rotate the directions. I'm saying that because there is a laborious repetitive aspect to this technique, and that can cause muscle strain. So just keep in mind, like, I don't mind a bit of pain associated with art. Like, there's a lot of pain that's associated with disappointing yourself. But I am far less, I think, disappointed sometimes doing a job that isn't great than not doing it at all and just feeling like I haven't achieved anything. think that's hard for me to deal with. Like, I feel if I don't do some of this, then I feel a little bit empty or lost in a way, because it's just how I'm engineered. Whew. Shake it off like a Polaroid picture, which you don't do apparently. It's a bad idea to do that. So apparently, Polaroid pictures, you just let it sit out of the light. I'm just going to work in a bit of that text. You can actually see it a bit there, that rippling sort of thing in the shadow there. Just going to overlap that a bit so that just because my style is not actually there is a sharper shadow up here because of the proximity, and once again I got my reference from real lighting, so that's what sort of led that here. But there's cases where I just sort of break up the shadow because it's not stylized that way, and then I'll check my reference again to see exactly how you might find that whether you do the letter C or reverse C for these bumps over and over again on any side of the leg will produce the same texture. The reason why I generally change direction or bear in mind the different directions of the lighting and the shape of what the surface of what you're drawing over is because it's a good habit to get into doing things the right way, or at least the most replicated way of what it is that you are trying to achieve. So if there's any like micro gaps, or if somehow over the entire sort of area, all the little accuracies that you're putting in there add up, it might actually come back to it's like a blessing in the micro details of what you're doing. I'm going to do the letter C down here on this side because the light's coming from this side on the lower part of the leg on this side, and that is creating a shadow on the left side of the little bumps. Just checking my reference again, there is a bit of sharper contours here with the anatomy. Right down to the knee. Vein is in there again. If your veins are looking a little bit overdone, you can thin them up and shadow them more in the dip of the leg where the shadow is. If you feel that they're looking too big, too bold, too Liefeld, you can darken them up where the shadow folds in, or thin them out so that they aren't so thick. So if the light is fading out up this direction, so I want to just lean off on the gas a little bit. This whole area is actually quite dark, so I'm gonna build it up. So much easier to write the letter C than it is, or the character C, than it is to write it, to do it backwards, because it fits into the stroke radius of a wrist. You can fix your wrist and use your arm, your whole arm. So I'm shaking the camera a bit, just sort of trying to take the pressure off my fingers having to do the gesture over and over again. It gets a little bit much. It is a bit laborious, but I like the result. There's Donatello above me there. He's got some nice highlights on the legs as well. Yeah, it's got some really nice textures in Donatello. I've done quite a few. My cubicle at work, or my desk, I should say. It's not a cubicle. My desk at work is lined with all the. It's lined with artwork. It's not all the artwork I've done. And Donatello, not being the latest thing that I've done, has actually stood out from a lot. Like there's qualities in it that have continued to last over time. Like you develop and you improve in areas in that. But Donatello was like one of those times where there's not much I could do to improve on it, really. Like I could have done everything the same but even smaller again, and then it's like at some point you have to sort of stop. You gotta finish the piece and move on. If I was just shading this like elementary style, just and rendering it, it would be done so quickly. I've not really done that. I don't remember ever doing that. I did do some A6 little moleskin when I got first started. I did some little A6 portrait to get started, little face portraits. And the blending on the skin tones and the faces and that had a bit of that in it, because that's all I knew back then. And then I would go and add in some acrylic skin pores, like the highlights on the skin pores. But it wasn't like super real fine. It was just approximately real. And they looked really good. They came up really well. It was very encouraging, and my friends were really like amazed by my progress, and they really liked my series of art that I was doing and sharing, and that. This is back in 2014 or something, 13. Yeah, those little techniques worked out really nicely. It was just a much smaller project. It was just easier to get started with. Yeah, but some of the face was just a little bit more rendered, you know, like just old school rendering. I always struggle to do the number 3. I keep saying number 3. I always had to like, okay, you're doing this, like, I always had to stop and think about it. When I drew all the numbers very quickly, but when I got to 3, I had to stop and think about the 2 arcs that are going against the pivotal rotational point of the base of the hand. to rendering. It's coming up. Just check my reference for anatomy and yeah, a bit more up here. In a way, this is like doing maths in terms of you see those boards just covered in algorithms. This is pretty much the same thing, except that none of this adds up to a mathematical equation. It adds up to an anatomical one and an artistically composite one. Alright, let's take this up a notch. We've got a bit of brown to employ, so we've got dark brown. Checking again on the reference just to see exactly how much contrast is coming in. The figurines themselves have a ambient occlusion wash, so they've put a little bit of brown tones paint in the crevices of each of the muscles, so you've got a faux shadow thing happening. In the model itself, which is a little deceptive. Because it's not the lighting, it's the coloring that's trying to like grab that. It's quite dramatic, but it works, comes up nicely, that's for sure. I'm going to put a bit of brown into the leg down here, just because it's going to go from green to brown, but I'm actually going to have to come back with the blue and some dahlia purple ultimately, because that's the cool side of the leg. So yeah, I mostly want to utilize cool, darker, shadowy colors. Just skipping over the top of the textures that are already there. Don't want to lose them by building up too much. Got a nice big shadow here on this side, so that's not supposed to go into the light at the moment. The dark brown is supposed to be into the darkest part of the green, but if I go lightly, it kind of does this yellowing sort of thing. Green mixes with the brown and you get the yellowing sort of thing. Alright, before I get too carried away with that, I would grab onto this blue and bring that into shadowy side, the cool shadowy side of the right thigh. I realize I am also running out of consciousness. It's getting late. Great progress tonight though. Ooh, just a little scratchy there. I'm going to smooth that out. Some base color or something. That's because I just went off track with my my stance a little bit. I just started using sort of like a scratchy sort of thing rather than the same lettering sort of system that I've been using. And that's the result. So yeah, once again, important to stick with the plan. You'll notice it when it just doesn't look right. It's just not fitting in. It's a visual medium, right? So it's gonna just look wrong when you don't get it right. Easy peasy. Bring in just a little bit of dull, like non-sharpened blue here, just to blend a little bit. I think I'm going to bring some a little bit of mid-tone green in. I've got some other greens here as well that looks like they got some yellow mixed in. I mean, I tell you what, as soon as you get that cool, warm contrasting in, when you put that lighting system in, you can see it. Once again, saying over and over again, real lighting references really, really help. It really makes a difference. I think, hey, it's fair enough to say that, like, I think all of my stuff has used, actually most of my stuff, not all of it, has used real lighting or real references. Some of it was just drawing something that somebody else drew, and you could see that it had like a secondhand sort of take on the rendering and the world that it was sort of set in. I'm just going to jump over to the warm side again, get some more compositional support. Sharpen up that yellow ochre a bit. And I am going to do the letter C on this side, just to build that texture into this side, which is this side here, the highlighted side of the skin tone. Much easier to do the letter C than a backwards C for me. And there's a little like a scribbly C, but the general sort of texturing and patterning is in there. Check my reference again. Coming up. All right. Finger's getting a little flat. Bring in some sienna brown, so like it's not dark brown just into the shadows, just to like not go overboard with how these shadows are working, doing their thing. So I'll just bring some sienna brown into the foresty green. Yeah, that's working nicely, that sienna brown. It's a nice blend. Nice colour to blend out of that forest green into the yellow and lime yellow and lime green. So there we go on that. Excuse me. There is some white on that side. I feel like I should just, before I get to whites and blacks, just to do the next available thing that's not white or black. So I can shoot off to Dahlia purple here. Let's get rid of any crumbs that might get dragged and drawn. So just bring in some Dahlia purple, the darker points, helping out this cool side get darker where it needs to, where the forest green couldn't quite get there, and where black will make it too dark for it to maintain color integrity. I think that's pretty much all I can add in for that. Just help out this vein shadow a little bit. A little bit more forest green around here and there, just to blend some of that in, smooth it off a little bit as well at the same time, so it's not too dry, not too scratchy. This is just a little bit light in here, so I just work in some of the textures there and update that tonals look. Take that up, that shadow in a bit more. Should put this dark blue on the other side there. Cool. Alright, so now we got our now we got our black and our white opportunity here to sort of very, very cautiously, very minimalistically use the black to help out at the extreme points where you really need it to count. That's it. Just along the definition of this leg here. Where's my, I should have like a mid-tone grey here. This might just help neutralize. What's happening off the leg there on the board? That's not. I don't have the exact shade of grey. I'm going to use a few greys here to get the sharpen up the leg there. It's going straight onto the toned paper there. It's not supposed to have any stroke or outline or halo or whatever you want to call it. It's just straight color or anatomy right to the edge. Just sort of work weaving my weave stance. Love LeBrock. If you like any of the music on the stream today, Fixt Music, Fixt, made it available to everyone on YouTube and Spotify, and allows content creators, streamers to stream for free. It's an excellent label list of bands. How are we going for time? Still got 20 minutes to 3 hours. Oh yeah, we got some white to put down. Before we go to white, let's go to a bit of sand. Is it sand? Yeah. Sable in French. Sable. And I'm just using sort of like a farmer scattering the seed sort of effect. Just finding my way again, sort of weaving a little bit, but a little bit more scattered, I guess. Just finding balancing out some of the rendering in general. But yeah, not shading, not full on dragging and surfboard waxing this thing, because I want to keep that texture in there. Cool. I mean, you can see a difference between these two legs, and that's basically white. That's how powerful white is on top of everything, and it's the same as black. You do that with black, you'll notice it big time. So two very powerful colors that you only want to use at the extremity of things. If you're doing a colored piece like this, if you're doing vibrant colored fan art with lots of tone and saturation and brilliance in the composition, you want to bring your grays, your whites, and your blacks under control. And just use them, you temper them very carefully. And I'm just finding the high points of the sand and that yellow areas that I just worked on a moment ago, and I'm just bringing in the white sort of stipple shake sort of javelin stabby sort of shake and stab and twist sort of thing, because it's a little stubborn at the moment to get that pigment onto the page. It's the salt. It's that chef sprinkling rock salt on his steaks. Got a couple of opportunities here on the vein. Just make sure you step back and have a look at how it's developing, because it's quite punchy. Little bits go a long way. There's not much white in the blue cooler highlight side of this, according to my light reference, so I'm just going to keep it to a minimum. Just help it out a little bit, but not much more than that. Otherwise it's going to change the shape of the leg and it's going to look really ripply and weird. Alright, so let's go with that. I might be able to put just a little bit of stippling down the middle of the shadow here like we did on the other leg, just to catch the reflection in the dip, if you see that happening. Just keep an eye out for that little opportunity again. Seems to work well. Just a couple little contributions to that right next to it, and it seems to work every time, 60% of the time. I like it. I like it. Yeah, that's not working. All right. Neutralize with base color. Right. Back to so we've got the last 15 minutes or so. Back to the leather. So once again, I'm just using my overlapping sort of aging streak sort of thing, holding the pencil a little loose, letting the randomness of it do its thing. Check my reference where my points of occlusion are, which is in here. Bit of an occlusion opportunity here, which is a division between the light sources. In here, and it's usually repeated, so there's one here as well. And then we'll use that horizon there to do what we did last time. And then I'm just going to add some texture into the highlights there, force force the texture into the lights. Alright. Gets pretty dark up on this side actually, according to the lighting, so we'll just do that. We'll just... It blacks out up here. Okay. So we'll just solidify that. Photo's the boss. What do we do after that? We went with... I think we went crimson. And then we went with dark brown. Got a little bit too loose then on the outside. Color, got to color within the lines. That's the rules. Don't know what's wrong with the music. I'm going to reinstall Spotify. It's anytime it starts a new song, it just cranks the audio, like the sound for half a second or a second. Don't know why. Didn't find. There was somebody who was talking about it on Reddit. They didn't get an answer, so I'm just going to restart, reinstall the thing. Now we'll go darker with the dark brown. So we'll follow that occlusion area in. All these sort of mix together to produce a color that is a little bit more dynamic, or not so much a color but a look that's a little bit more dynamic. Than just straight up browns. Like this is really dark in here. You could just do it dark brown from the get-go, but I like actually building some of these things up of 3 or 4 different colors and then just seeing the result of those colors all mixed together. Now we've got some Dahlia purple, so we'll just go lightly with that for now. And it looks like we're going to have the feet for the next stream, and then a quality pass across the rest of it, and that'll be the final for Mikey. And I guess we pick up on the next turtle after that. I've got lots of the 1990 characters to do. So I guess after turtles are pretty... I did a Splinter portrait, like a head portrait. And I did... oh no, I didn't do Shredder, but I'd like to do Casey Jones. Better get that blue in on this side before it gets too far along. This band down the bottom is actually just really dark. Keep bringing in some lighter colors from this section here, and I'm just using a waxing sort of stance, like a polishing surfboard waxing sort of stance. That's that bounce lighting, that's the occlusion. Bit of yellow ochre just to soften off that orange. Probably push down a little bit further on the outside there. I'm gonna tone it down again in a second. Just want to get some highlights in here. Ultimately, the longer you spend filling it in, you're going to get to a point where it gets finer and finer, and your pencils just need to be a little bit sharper, and you push less on them. And if you notice, like, kind of crummy paper, like little dabs of white on the page, is because I think it's either the light colors coming through, the darker colors not smearing off enough, or the page coming through. And when you bring a base color back in, or a color that the pigment is relatively soft, you actually get it sort of blend in smooth and polish that off and sort of gets rid of it. So that's your go-to there. I'm going to bring some black in at this stage because we've got some pretty dark colors in the shadows already. So I'm just going to make sure that the division between the sections of this whatever you want to call them. There's a knee pad, these little knee pad sections that they're actually thoroughly divided. Gets pretty dark on the outside here and a little desaturated, so I'll just go a little bit liberal with the black there. Down here, there is a knee section down the bottom here that is needing a bit of definition, but it also might benefit from some color. So I'll start off by putting in some dark brown. It's kind of like the base color. On this side, I'll use some denim blue. Again, I'm going to add to it with some crimson up here. Just a little bit of crimson. It's probably a little bit too light. Some Dahlia purple halfway between the blue and the crimson. That's not bad. That look all up. Might leave it there with that because that's come up alright. Got a poppy red here just as a mid-tone. I can see some like white sort of crumminess in there. If this is too bright for you, the colors like that, if it's too rich, I would recommend finding browns or greys actually, and mixing warm greys and that in with it, and that will tone it down and bring it back to reality. If that's what you're seeking, thinking, feeling. I've pretty much been running the Mikey Vibrance on him. that sort of leaning into what makes him his personality. Just going to use a little bit of white liberally around this space here to see if I can sort of make some sense out of it. I think it needs to be a little more consistent, a little flatter. Bit of denim blue again. It's quite strong, that denim blue. Really strong. Let's come up right. Now we've got a bit of an idea of that compositional sort of construction there is going to help out the shadowing that's down around near that area. Sort of match it up. Something else you can do with the highlights, these white highlights on the leather, is hit it in the other direction. So it's just linear, but you can just add just a couple of perpendicular strokes here and there. And that just creates that illusion of taut or stretched. Leather. Right, I think we've covered it. We've just hit 3 hours now, and we've done the thighs and knee pads. Pretty happy with that. So the next thing we would do is the calves, ankles, and feet, and then have a look at the balance, the compositional balance of the whole thing, and tidy up any lines on the outside, make sure it's neat, check earlier work to see if I have improved else later, and then bring some of the earlier work up to state. So a couple of highlights here along that bone, or yeah, I think it's a bone or a muscle right there, just to boost that a little bit, not too much. Yeah, I might bring some more of the techniques we've just used in the knee pads into the elbows, the elbow pads, and we can also bring in some of the darker tones into the structural sort of integrity of lighting there and the texture to make it look a little bit more interesting. I did not do that on this side so much. So just be careful I don't jab it somewhere that don't belong. It's looking for asymmetry. That's what we're doing. We're just bringing a little bit of asymmetry in just a couple of places where it should be a little bit more organic. Like if you put a little bit of a dark stroke up here into the light, you get just a little bit more shape. Rather than just drawing a white line across it, you can use just a little bit of a little bit of your tonal tool set to create that a bump out of it, a bit of asymmetry. This is good. Awesome. All right, that is all we can do for today. So, and basically an hour and a half of thigh in the knee. Yeah, the time passed. It kind of like that doesn't bother me so much as like getting something done nicely is the way that I want to do it. That's what I'm looking forward to. So I'm happy with the results. I've burnt through 3 hours, but I like it. I like what we're doing with the time. So zoom up a little bit here. The lighting looks good under the knees, down onto the calf muzzles, and that's, once again, that's real lighting reference. That's actual light, it's actual shadows being cast on there thanks to the lighting and the reference there. They're actually more substantial than what I've done, but I haven't gone and rendered it all out because I didn't want to lose too much or bleed too much or bend the paper too much. I just kept it a little bit core. That's the main thing. It's jumping off the page. It's going well. Alright, great. Thank you so much, guys. I know you're either lurking or you're catching up on this video after it's gone live because we're on different time zones and that, but that's a good thing about YouTube is that it has it's set up for the archive. By all means, feel free to say hi in the comments. You can do that too. I'll read them all. We're just getting started here, so nobody really knows, not a whole lot of people knows we're here yet, so that's all good. But I hope you enjoy. Feel free to pass this on for anyone who's wanting to get into traditional coloring. We're going to look at other stuff in the future as well, including more anatomy, pencil, gestural drawing, visual storytelling, ink, digital ink, more color, more fan art, more character design and creation and storytelling, writing, and that as well. Always visual storytelling and also oil painting as well. So we'll come back to that a while yet. So looking forward to doing it. But I just want to thank you all for watching, and I will see you very soon for the last, it's fair enough to say, the last episode for Michelangelo. Awesome. Well, if you want to get onto those videos as they're coming out or catch me live, you know what to do, guys, with your subscribes and your notifications, so you can do that. Otherwise, I'll catch you next time I catch you. So love and peace, stay creative, and stay away from toxicity. See yous.